Well, we're here today to talk with Justice Mary Ellen Hicks, who was the judge of the 231st District Court in Tarrant County and also the justice on the Second Court of Appeals in Fort Worth. And good morning.
Good morning,
Justice.
Attorney Cockrell.
Thank you. And it's nice to see you, and it's nice that you're here today.
Thank you.
I'm very glad that you're able to do this interview. And as you know, this is for the State Bar of Texas. And we would like to know a little bit about you and your past. And so let me begin with this first question. What first made you decide to become a lawyer?
I had the great fortune, I believe, of having a great uncle who was a pioneer lawyer here in the state of Texas. His name, and of course he has gone on to better places in my opinion, his name was W.J. Durham. And I knew as a young person I could be a lawyer because my uncle was a lawyer. So I probably was age 5 when I decided that was a career path that I wanted to take.
That's good. And who or what, were there any particular cases that were inspirational or challenging in your practice as an attorney?
I think the most interesting cases I ever had, both as a private practitioner and also when I was on the 231st, which is a family law court, were the cases involving children. Children are the most vulnerable people, in my opinion, in our society, as are our seniors. But I think the most challenging and yet rewarding cases for me have always involved working to do the best thing in the best interests of children.
So when did you go to law school?
I went to law school at Texas Tech. Guns up, Red Raider. I went in 71 and I finished in 74.
Well, then let me back up. Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Odessa. My sisters and I are Army brats, and so we lived in many places, including Louisiana and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But I did graduate from high school in Odessa, Texas. And then from there went to Texas Woman's University in Denton, and then on to Tech Law School.
And when did you get out of Texas Tech Law School?
74.
74. Was that one of the first law classes there?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, another person of color, African American, Gene Gaines, had gone to Texas Tech, did not graduate, but I have the distinction of being the first black graduate of the Texas Tech School of Law, of which I am extremely proud. I think I got a great education there. I made a lot of friends, folks that are still not only friends today, but there's a bond. I think you know what I mean. There's a bond of us wherever we went to law school that went through, I say, the triumph of getting in and getting out.
Well, tell us how your uncle inspired you, what it is that he did to do that.
I think my uncle inspired me along with his brother, my grandfather, Bruce Durham, and those brothers and sisters, because with a little of nothing, they became successful people. My great uncle, I can remember him taking vegetables and chickens and things like that for legal fees. He did civil rights, he did criminal cases, you name it. And the interesting thing about WJ did not go to law school. He read law. I think the story in the family goes he was working in a white law firm and he read the law books and they encouraged him. He may have started as a janitor, I don't know. But he read law and passed the bar. And he was just incredible. He had a great sense of humor, as did his brother, my grandfather. But they were just inspirational. And even today, people come up to me, especially the older lawyers or older citizens, and remember him and remember everything that he achieved for others. He never got rich. I don't think he's been given his place in society the way he should have been recognized, but that's for another day and another story. I know the State Bar did something this summer about the Sweat versus Painter case with Justice Thurgood Marshall. Well, W.J. Durham was a counsel on that case as well. So when I think about it, Thurgood Marshall Law School owes a debt of indebtedness not only to Thurgood Marshall, but to W.J. Durham.
Where did W.J. Durham practice?
He practiced in East Texas, he practiced in Dallas, and he practiced all over the state, quite frankly. At that time, there were not many African or black lawyers. So as a result, I guess you could say he kind of rode the circuit.
Did you ever practice with him?
No, unfortunately. That was my intention. I have another first cousin who is since deceased who became a lawyer. And our plans, my first cousin and I, were to one day work for our great uncle. He died while I was in college, unfortunately.
After you got out of law school, where did you go to work?
I came to the best city in the world besides Houston, Fort Worth. I had a lot of great job offers here in Fort Worth. I was, let's be for real, I was a novelty. I mean, when you think about it, a black female lawyer. And so I had some opportunities of which I'll always be grateful. I thought I wanted to be a labor lawyer, and the late, great Mr. Youngblood hired me at the National Labor Relations Board, and then I decided I didn't want to be a labor lawyer. Probably would have been sort of interesting, to say the least, but then I went to work for Huey Mitchell and Norman Bonner, and they had just a small partnership of black lawyers who did everything, anything that came through the door. Now, they didn't take chickens and vegetables for their fees, but they represented a lot of people.
What kind of cases did you handle?
Anything they gave me. When I said, I think the first time I'd ever been in a probate court, Mr. Mitchell sent me downtown to do something on a probate course. I remember going before the Honorable Eldon Mahon, the late great Eldon Mahon, with Attorney Bonner, unfortunately, who is now deceased, on some sort of insurance case. The guy actually was workman's comp. The guy died, and unfortunately, he had several wives. So the insurance company needed to know who to pay. Quite interesting.
And then, how long did you work for Huey Mitchell?
About 2 years, and then Norman Bonner and I went out together. We went to Evans Avenue, which is the jewel, if you will, for me, of the south side of Fort Worth, predominantly black, 100% black at that time. And we purchased an old house and fixed it up and opened our doors to the community. And at that point, it seemed like most of my clients were ladies of the evening. But they paid. And in those days, folks saw, and I don't know if they still do, prostitution or whatever as a victimless crime. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway. And Norman did a little of everything. He did criminal law. He did comp. Comp was still viable. He did personal injury. It was just an honor to work for him, with him, and I learned a lot. And I miss him every day. I would say, other than my family and my great uncle, Norman Bonner Jr. was the first mentor that I ever had.
And what was the name of your firm?
Bonner and Hicks.
Bonner and Hicks.
He got top billing, of course, because he was the one that knew how to do things, not me.
And how long were you with him?
Probably 2 years. I got fast-tracked. I have always been interested in politics. And one of the things my mother and father stressed to us was civic participation. So when we moved to Fort Worth, I enticed a sister, Deborah, to move with me. Thank goodness she found a job right away. But civic participation. So we worked on, then Hugh Palmer was running for mayor, and we worked on his campaign. The majority of the community was with the other gentleman who was running, but we just liked Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer's politics seemed more in line with us, and we remembered our mother's lessons. Be engaged, be involved, vote. So I did a little in his campaign, got to meet him, and as a result, when a vacancy came for a municipal court judgeship, I was elated to receive that appointment.
When was that?
You're really taking me back. I want to say, I was trying to figure it out, maybe 1977. So you can see I didn't work very hard. My friends say, because I've had I've had the most marvelous legal, I don't know what I would call it, things that have happened to me, but I became a municipal court judge. 77 or 78, I think. I just can't remember.
And how long were you a municipal judge?
A year or two, and then Mayor Hugh Palmer nominated me, and I became chief judge. And you, Perry, you will remember those days. We're talking about the 70s when there certainly were no black judges, very few women judges. There wasn't a lot of diversity in our legal community here in Tarrant County. Of course, that has changed, all for the best in my opinion. But there just weren't a lot of us, and I call myself a novelty. I was at the right place at the right time, and I not only chief judge, I became chief judge, occupied that for a couple of years, and then decided it was time to move on.
And where did you go after that?
I moved on and I lost the election. I ran for county criminal court. I decided, in my life I'm all over the place, but I decided I wanted to be a criminal court judge. And so I ran, and I lost in the Democratic primary by 88 votes. But it brought me to the attention of Governor Mark White and a lot of other people who were in a position to elevate me to an even higher court. But I would say for young lawyers, political participation is very, very important. But I think what's even more important, don't do it to get a job. I think I don't want to be misleading. I think all of us have a responsibility and a duty, because of our legal training, to be involved in pro bono work, or helping out at a homeless shelter, or voting, or doing whatever we can to make our society even greater. And when you look at the great lawyers of the past, whatever color they were, whatever their gender is, those men and women have made a difference in this country. And for me, lawyers built this country. So I know I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but then Senator Palmer, by then was a state senator, and there were all these vacancies in Tarrant County. And quite frankly, I had a decision to make. There were civil courts, there were criminal courts, there were family courts. You will remember Judge Crowley, Judge Carper, Judge Clifford Davis, and myself. There were 4 vacancies, and I chose the family court, and the rest, as they say, is history.
When were you appointed to the family court?
You would ask that. Okay, let's see. That had to be 83. 83. That was, I do remember that date, 1983, because we went to Austin for the vote. The Senate had to approve us, of course. And we went to Austin, my family and I, and was actually sworn in there in Austin. And what a day, what a privilege. And it wasn't just about me. I want to stress that. It was about women. It was about women, men and women of color. It was about the whole legal profession. And it also said a lot about Tarrant County. You think about that. Tarrant County at that point had, Judge Louis Stearns had been appointed, and then he was removed, and Judge Davis got it, and then myself. That shows to me only in Tarrant County would that had happened at that time. That wasn't happening all over the state the way it is now, but it was Tarrant County, and I want to stress that. And of course, that was opposition, so what? But it just shows how great and how forward-thinking our county is.
And how long were you on? And that was the 231st?
That was the 231st Family District Court. Actually, it was general jurisdiction. Let me tell you something interesting. That court had been occupied, the 231st, by Judge Joe Spurlock, who was appointed to the Court of Appeals. So I always tell Judge Spurlock, I'm following him. But I was there 10 years. And that's about as long as one needs to be in family court, in my opinion.
I see.
8 years would be even better.
Did you have any, during that time on the district court, did you have any particular cases that were inspirational or interesting?
I wouldn't call it inspirational or interesting, but I had the gentleman, Mr. George Lott, who went on a rampage and injured judges and killed 2 lawyers. I actually presided over his divorce. And it's my understanding that he stuck his head in my courtroom on that fateful day when he decided the only way he had out was to kill some of us.
I don't, can you, I hate to go into that, but you.
Well, I think it's a part of my history, though.
No, you might want to describe that case because I'm not sure people know
Right.
what you're talking about, if that even is.
Mr. Lott was married to another lawyer. Neither really practiced law. Mr. Lott came from a quite well-to-do family. He had written a Dungeons and Dragons sort of game, which he made money from. He had inherited a lot of stocks. And so he did not really work as a lawyer. He was getting a divorce. Unfortunately, the divorce was filed in the 231st. And he had a jury trial, like a 2-week jury trial. And the jury awarded custody to his wife. And he was angry at everybody. As I recall, I had sent him to 3 different psychologists at various times, and all 3 agreed on his issues. I'll just put it like that. And as a result, he was angry at me. He was angry at the amicus lawyer. He had a whole list of people that he disliked. Some of them I will never figure out why he disliked so much. But he had mapped to our houses. He eventually surrendered to WFAA, and the first name he called out on his list was yours truly. So that was the most distressing time. My mother was still alive. I had to get to her to say, I'm okay. I had to let my sisters know and relatives all over the country know that I was all right. But Mr. Lott, God rest his soul, was a very disturbed person. And he was angry at me because I had given him supervised visitation. And there were other allegations that I won't go into that were very, very serious. And our current DA, Judge Sharon Wilson here in Tarrant County, presided over his criminal trial. The trial was moved to Amarillo. He called all sorts of people as witnesses, including myself as a character witness for him. Don't understand that. And I think the question he asked of me was, had not he always obeyed anything I ordered him to do? Child support or whatever I ordered him to do. And of course the answer was yes. But unfortunately, because I don't believe in the death penalty, the state of Texas did execute Mr. Lott. And he hurt Chief Justice John Hill, Judge Ashworth. And killed Chris Marshall of the DA's office, head of the Appellate section, and a marvelous young man from Amarillo. From Waco. So that's the most distressing thing, other than that loved ones I've lost, or my parents, or my granddaddy. That's the most stressing thing that's ever happened to me. And I'll carry that to my grave. Could I have done anything differently where he was concerned? And I've examined that, and I know every order I took was in the best interest of that family unit, and most particularly his young son. And we think what motivated, the Court of Appeals affirmed the judgment. That's why he went upstairs to kill some of them. But a prosecutor from Indiana actually came down for the trial in Amarillo because there were more charges against him where his former wife was allowing him to see the child without supervision.
Oh, well, I can't imagine what that was like. And during your time on the district court bench, were there any other interesting cases?
They were all interesting. They were all. I had a guy that
any that you could talk about.
The guy who I ordered him to give his wife the engagement ring that had been a gift. Well, he didn't want to do that, and he swallowed it. Needless to say, I held him in contempt, and he was escorted over to the sheriff's department, where you can imagine how they extracted the ring. Well, guess what? We found out it wasn't even the real diamond. It was a CZ. So I thought that was most interesting. That case settled. I think one of the most important things for me while I was in the district court was the caliber of lawyers that we have in this county. And I mean that very, very sincerely. They, for the most part, they were cooperative and energetic and trustworthy and respectful and honest. And to this day, that is one of the things that impresses me the most, not only about Tarrant County. I don't know if you're aware, I've spent the last, I guess we'll get into that, almost 20 years primarily working in Harris County. And the Harris County lawyers and judges are as ethical and hardworking and respectful as the ones in Tarrant County. And I'll say it honestly, the family lawyers and the judges in Tarrant County, those 10 years I was there, raised me. And I will always be grateful. I really will. I mean, not a day went by that I couldn't call on, Judge Robert Wright, who is now deceased, Judge Harold Valderas, who's now deceased, Judge Edison, who is now deceased. They were just Judge Eva Barnes. I mean, the list goes on and on. We were a unit. I mean, we were I don't know what you would call that, like a family, I would say. And I think that's what makes Tarrant County and Harris County unique to me.
Is there any advice you would give any family attorneys working in the district court level?
I'd say not only know your judge, know your coordinator, know your court reporter. Don't argue with. I think you can make a good point without arguing and be prepared, but have a righteous argument. Don't come in there and quote some case from 1812 before Texas became a state. Be honest with judges, but know the staff. Be courteous. Okay, we don't have a lot of Rambo lawyers here. We have some. And I probably could name all 5 of them, but since I don't want you to have to represent me by calling them out, I'll keep my mouth shut. But that's the advice I would give young lawyers. And if you don't know, ask. Don't be ashamed. I can remember, quite frankly, first time I ever had to declare a mistrial. I had a jury trial, and I didn't have a lot of jury trials, I must say. I think the lawyers, after they got to know me, knew what I liked and what I didn't and what I put up with. But this is one of my few jury trials, and I call Justice Hal Lattimore and Judge Charlie Murray. What do I do? What do I do? And they were so wonderful. And that, for me, is the best advice I ever got. If you don't know, if you're not sure, you can go to the law library at A&M, and you can go see Peggy Martindale in our law library and ask for help. But the best thing for me was to not be ashamed that I didn't know and ask someone who can help.
How many jury trials did you have on the family district bench?
Probably 5.
Over a 10-year period?
Yes, and the worst was the Lott case. That was the worst, and that was the longest one I had, was 2 weeks.
How many non-jury cases would you say?
I have no idea. Some were, a couple of days. Some of them were 2 hours. One of the things Judge Sean O'Reilly and Judge Bob Wright and I did, we went to Harvard in the late 80s and took negotiation and mediation from Professor Fisher. We saw that as a trend that was coming, and so we learned mediation. They learned, I don't know if I learned anything. It was fun being in Cambridge, not hot Fort Worth in the summer. But I think because we saw that coming, sometimes the trials would last 15 minutes. Sometimes they'd be, some man or woman didn't want to pay guideline child support or didn't know why they had to have a standard possession order. And there were significant cases as well. There were cases of people of great wealth. We had cases where one of the other spouses was suing for a tort, for personal injury. Exposure to some STD or something. In family law, you get it all. You get bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law with the tort. You get everything. And I think sometimes people put family lawyers and judges down, and that's unfortunate. one of the things I'm urging lawyers to do in Harris County is file more summary judgments. Sometimes I'll have a mediation and think, why are you all here? Go file a motion for a summary judgment. But so far, I think judges are reluctant in family law to do that. But I think that's going to happen, and that's going to cut down on some of the great volumes of things that we have. But we had all sorts of interesting cases.
Did you have associate judges back then?
Absolutely. We had Judge Frank Sullivan, Judge Mary Shawn O'Reilly, Judge Pat Andrews, Judge Deborah Learman, who's now in the Texas Supreme Court, was one of our associate judges. We had Judge Art Enos. I know I'm going to leave somebody out. Judge Doug Clark. Sorry if I left you. I can't. My memory's going.
And, okay, so you...
Judge Shireen Krause was mine. Where we went to a system where we would choose Judge Delbert Wilson, Judge Carmen Johnson. And I have to say this about the family judges. We were very, very concerned about diversity. I want to put that plug in. We wanted the bench to look like society. And that's the same thing in Houston as well. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Now, when did you get off with 231st?
Okay, after George Lott, I immediately decided, seriously, I was not going to run again. I really did not want to practice law because you all work too hard. And I needed to look for something else. And Dwayne Dent, who's a personal injury lawyer, was the first person, and the Honorable Glenn Lewis, a great friend of mine, who was in the legislature, talked to me about the possibility of the Court of Appeals. And I was like, that sounds pretty good to me. And so I sought a position on the Court of Appeals. And again, it did not hurt that I was black and a woman, and the late, great Ann Richards, the greatest governor that's ever lived, in my opinion, other than Mark White, who appointed me as a justice on the Second Court of Appeals. And that was the end of 1992. So in 92, I became a justice on the Court of Appeals. Again, there'd never been any women up there, and there'd never been anybody of color.
Yeah. Where was the swearing in?
The swearing in was in the courtroom.
Courtroom?
It was in the courtroom.
Who swore you in?
I want to say Chief Justice Hill.
Yeah. Who was on the court back then?
Okay, Justice Sidney Farrar, who used to get on me because his wife was my doctor, and I was not a very good patient, I have to say that. John Hill, Justice John Hill was the chief judge. Justice Weaver, who was my friend from family court. Judge David Ferris, outstanding, brilliant mind. Justice Hal Lattimore, who I called Uncle Hal. Sorry, Judge Evans, he was my uncle too. David is my friend, and so when he would call Uncle Hal, Judge Mary Shawn O'Reilly and I, probably my best friend, we called him Uncle Hal. I don't think Uncle Hal ever got upset about that. I think is that 7 of us?
That's 5.
5. Then me, and who am I forgetting?
Judge Day on the...
Yes, Judge Sam Day. Judge Sam Day, that's exactly right.
Oh, that's good. Well, now, during your time in private practice, did you handle appeals?
No.
No, I think you did. I saw an appeal. I checked, and I know there was an appeal with your name as.
Probably in name only. You know what I'm saying? And I probably lost. You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't. Do you like appellate practice?
I really did. I think that it made me go back and learn. I think the best thing about appellate court for anybody, me or anybody else, is the search for what is actually the law. You don't make law. You go back and find a precedent that fits. And a lot of times, cases were right on point. They were right. So that was very exciting to me. I had a great staff. I had great briefing attorneys. I had a great secretary, hi Michelle, that I shared with Justice Weaver. I was on a great panel, the panel with Justice Weaver and Judge Farrar. And I remember you appearing before that lovely panel or
do.
3.
I do. It was
And
great.
you did quite well with us.
I know Todd Weaver and you and Judge Farrar all were great that day. I loved it. I still remember that argument that morning. So, well, tell us what was a typical day like?
I would usually get there between 8 and 8:30. I'm an early riser, and so I would get there, and you would get the cases that you had been assigned. Now the boring ones, I'll be honest, I would give to my briefing attorney, right, Libby? I would give to the briefing, but it was research. It was really learning how to use all the tools available to us. The computer whiz up there was Justice Lattimore, which was wonderful. And I could go to him and say, where can I find this?
You didn't have, did you have
Yeah, we did.
computerized research
Oh, yes,
then?
absolutely. Absolutely. And the staff attorneys were welcome, were outstanding. I think the best thing about it for me, though, I had to read. I mean, I didn't read in the court, I mean, in 231st. Family judges have more discretion than anybody. There may be a case on point, okay? But for the most part, you relied on your judgment, your background, what people said, what physical evidence. In the Court of Appeals, quite different. And it was so much, and I'll use the word fun, to go back and see a case that was decided in, the days of Truman, that was still the law in Texas. And that made me have greater respect for the profession that both of us have chosen. It made me have respect to know that these were, and they were all men then, that these men made the right decision. And it lasted all this time.
Now, the records, you had to read all through those yourself. How did you?
Well, what I
get through the
do,
record?
what I would do, I would keep the cases that were most interesting. But I would sit and talk to my briefing attorneys and just ask, do you want to take this one, and I'll take that one, and whatever. But a lot of time I would read everything. I mean, it's like I remember a case of trespass to try title. I mean, probate cases. I guess for me, I wanted to know everything. Okay, the criminal cases were interesting, and you got to remember, Second Court of Appeals. I think we had cases coming from 12 counties. And again, I've got to brag on Chief Justice Hill. He wanted those cases out of there. I think we had a deadline of 6 months. We did not hold cases. We felt people needed some sort of resolution. They needed to move on. But I read everything. I mean, I just read everything. So if I wasn't on a panel that week, I would read, I guess, all week. And I would take notes. And then I'd go do my research, okay? And then Libby or my briefing attorney, we would talk. Or I'd go see the staff attorney, Jeanette, and say, I need some help, okay? But it was an awesome experience. I mean, it was an awesome experience for me. And to say that I got closer to people is absolutely true. Yvonne Palmer, our chief clerk. I mean, all those women, and they were all women in auxiliary positions. The secretaries, people. Now, we had a male briefing attorney. I think Justice Lattimore had a young man who briefed for him. But it was a wonderful experience for me. Challenging. I was frightened. I really was. I'll be honest. I put on this big show, but I was really, really frightened that I was not up to task. I really, really was. And it's like, Mary Ellen, why'd you do this? But all in all, and I was only there 2 years, unfortunately. But it was a great experience. I remember going to Wichita Falls to have court. And that was fun as well, because again, you got to meet other lawyers, you got to meet judges, some of which I knew who did family law. But it was most rewarding. And for me, the one thing I remember, it made me think. It made me reason more. It made me understand more. And for that, I'll always be grateful.
Well, what kind of advice would you give attorneys in preparing their appellate briefs?
Be brief. Get to the point. Don't try to finagle stuff. Those folks up there are extremely bright, and they're bright staff and bright minds. Don't try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I love the oral arguments personally because you learned a lot. You learned, and be prepared for the pros and the cons. Don't just try to sell a justice on you. Anticipate what the other side is going to say. Really, and some of the appeals we got were just absolutely worthless. Somebody pleads guilty and then appeals pro se. I mean, it's like, okay, you pled guilty, and you're saying it's insufficient evidence. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. But I would say to young lawyers again, it's a great place to be. I think the Second Court of Appeals may all be women now. I'm not sure. I think Justice Bonnie Sutter just got appointed. But know what you're talking about, and don't just appeal to appeal. Just don't send us 40 pages of the same things over and over again. Doesn't work. What I'd like to see the Court of Appeals do, quite frankly, if I can give them a suggestion, do like the appellate courts in Harris County. They refer a lot of cases to mediation. I've gotten quite a few cases from the 14th Court in Harris County, and they're family cases, okay? And I work real hard to get them settled. But they're using that as a tool because of the great numbers of cases that they have.
I'm familiar. I've gone through
that. I know. I saw you there.
What about? Do you have any advice on some of the points or the issues on appeal that are either like legal insufficiency or factual insufficiency or no evidence, or did those
call it the way
start,
you see it?
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
those terms start?
Yeah. And my advice is, if after you read someone's record or take it, as a potential case, if there's nothing to it, don't do it. I'm real serious about that.
What do you do with an attorney? Because I know this comes up a lot with appellate lawyers. Clients come in and they want you to take the appeal, and you don't know anything about the prior case.
Right.
And you don't even know if you have
anything.
A case to appeal. So what is your advice to a lawyer?
Don't. My advice would be to study the record, talk to people, tell them you'll let them know something. Because the problem is judges talk just like lawyers do. And you don't want to get a reputation as somebody that files anything and everything. And I know that sounds crazy. We have people that are appellate specialists, and that's all they do. And I know they reject a lot of cases. But the ones that used to bother, the lawyer would just flat tell us, I know this is a waste of you all's time. And I appreciated that. Probably got them in trouble with their clients. But most of those cases, period, were criminal. Most of those cases were criminal cases where somebody pled guilty or somebody was caught in the car dealership with the burglar tools at 2:30 in the morning when the silent alarm went off. And they're saying the evidence is insufficient or whatever. I think lawyers, we need to be more discriminating. I firmly believe everyone is entitled to quality representation. That's why I'm so proud lawyers are doing all this pro bono, like the lawyers here in Tarrant County and all over the state. I think we got to be honest with people. And sometimes there's just nothing to it. And I think people will respect us more if we just say no. And I mean that. Because some of I'm like, what are you talking about? Or somebody that just went and copied the other side's, positions and things. But for me, be ready to, on oral argument, and I like the oral argument.
Yeah, what
personally.
Advice would you say give attorneys on oral argument?
On oral argument, be prepared, be sharp, be reasonable, be brief. You know what I'm saying? Because we old people, we forget a lot. No, seriously.
Does oral argument actually help?
To me, it did. It especially if I was kind of in the middle. In fact, if it's like, well, something's not right here. I'd really like to hear the other side. it helped me. Now, I don't know about other folks up there. Sometimes I'd made up my mind. Many times I had not. I'd read it, I'd made my notes, I'd researched and read a couple of cases, and then oral argument changed my mind.
Well, how was a case decided up there? Do y'all meet as a group and say, what do you think? Affirm,
The
reverse,
panel
or-
does, as a panel, and there were just a couple of cases where we all got together and made some decisions. I have to talk about the one case that will always stick in my mind. I think it was against a newspaper, and they had the idea that victims of sexual assault would not be identified. And I thought a newspaper did everything but say this woman's name. They said she was best friends with the mayor. They said she drove a red foreign car. They said she owned a travel agency. They said she lived on the east side. I thought that just went too far. And I think people knew who they were talking about. It was a brutal, brutal, brutal rape. Okay? And of course, I lost that case in the Court of Appeals. It went to the Texas Supreme Court. I lost again. Judge Ferris as I recall, had a wonderful dissent. I believe in the First Amendment. However, I thought it went too far. The newspaper went too far. But again, I lost it. And we had a lot of discussion about it. And the other thing that helped me was listening to Justice Farrar or Justice Weaver, or going in and seeing Chief Justice Hill and talking to him about things. He had an open door policy where you could go in and talk to him, and but that case will always stick with me. I think the lady eventually left the city, and to me, her life was destroyed. And I think sometimes publications in that instance, in my opinion, went too far. But reading those cases, the decisions all over the country, was fascinating for me. But that case has stuck with me over the years. And it's not just because I'm a woman. I think to me, it was like, this is not fair. This is not right. Which wasn't legal, but I think that's why it stuck with me the way it has.
How did your life change when you from the district bench to the appellate?
It was much quieter up there, to say the least. In the 231st, I had an open door policy. Anybody could come back and see me. I had an office full of toys for when I interviewed children. I tried to interview children, depending on their age, away from the courthouse. And one of my favorite places was the ice skating rink at Tandy, or McDonald's, or somewhere like that. It's like, who is this strange woman that I have to talk to? Why is she asking me, what do I do with dad, or what fun do I have with mom, or whatever? So the difference was you're more isolated on the Court of Appeals. You're much, much more isolated. And that's okay. I mean, that's the way it needs to be. The staff up there was incredible. Yvonne Palmer and her folks were just absolutely, they were smart as some of us, as far as I'm concerned. But that was a good feeling. Again, though, I do not think I would have been accepted anywhere else at that point in my life but Tarrant County. Isn't that interesting? I mean, that's just the way I felt about it. I had one unpleasant something happened to me while I was on the Court of Appeals, and it had nothing to do with the justices or the staff. Okay? Only one in 2 years where I was just devastated, and I'm going to share the story. I'm not going to call any names, but a firm, not your former firm, was celebrating its anniversary, and the celebration was in the Court of Appeals. And the named partner, I still have the suit. I can't wear it. I'm too fat. But anyway, I had a purple suit on and a wonderful scarf from the Modern Art Museum in New York. My sister had sent me. I thought I looked very nice. And this gentleman asked me to take his coat. He assumed I was a wait staff. Waitstaff had on black and white. Mary Ellen had on loud purple. And now I wish I had taken that coat. It was a Burberry coat, and a gentleman friend of mine would have looked very nice in it, but I didn't. And I will never forget how Chief Justice Hill and Justice Farrar was so hurt for me. It showed their understanding and their belief in me, so to say. And I left the celebration, didn't come back that day, as I recall. I got my purse and I left. Maybe not the right response, but I was like, wait a minute. We have not overcome yet. If the assumption is the only black person up here has to be the waitstaff. And that was the only time I can think of when I was devastated. And it wasn't the justices, it was just, and somebody said, oh, Mary Ellen, he's old. Well, I'm old too. Okay? So, anyway.
That was in the 90s when you were on the Court of Appeals?
That's exactly right. That was exactly right. And they were celebrating their 100th year as a firm. Like I said, it was not your firm. Your former firm. It was not. Let me say for the record, it was not Candy Hanger. It was not Candy Hanger.
No, there's no way that would be Candy Hanger.
It wouldn't.
But, who was your mentor on the Court of Appeals?
All of them, but in particular, I have to say Chief Justice Hill and Justice Farrar. And Uncle Hal. The doors were always open. Their doors were, if I didn't understand something, or if there was a silly rule by a former Chief Justice that the clerks and secretaries couldn't wear pants. Come on, you all, it's the 90s. Women can wear pants. Justice Hill appointed me chair of the Personnel Committee. We changed that rule, okay? I mean, these are folks making a little more than minimum wage. Do we expect them to have a suit on every day? Friday was casual day. Things like that. But I knew I could go to them and talk to them. And no question was silly. No question was stupid. They listened and they cared. They really, really, really cared. And for that, I will always be grateful. And I mean that sincerely.
Sure. So just as attorneys should mentor young attorneys, the
they mentored me.
Mentor each other.
Exactly. And it happened when I was a family judge. It has happened for me in Houston, and it has happened on the Court of Appeals. And that, to me, that's what makes Fort Worth unique. It really, really makes Fort Worth unique.
Now, what did you find most rewarding as an appellate judge?
The hours. Like in the summer, it was kind of catch-up time. And I like the isolation, give you time to work and to think. I like that. I mean, I really did.
I'm sorry. Did you like to write?
I took a writing class. I really did. I didn't think I would, but I did. Okay? And then I would ask, what do you think about this? Does this make sense? And they never put me down for that. They never said, well, Mary Ellen, that's stupid. Or what about, somebody said, well, what about this? And I'll tell you something else, seriously. Those clerks and our little secretary, those were some sharp people. They were brilliant people. So, but I did learn, I like to write. I learned I like to reason and make something speak to what our law really is. And what it not what it should be. And what it should be, Mary Ellen, that is not your job. Run for the legislature, but.
And who was your law clerk or briefing attorney?
She left me to go to, in fact, she had worked for, I want to say Judge Spurlock. I need to ask him. I think Libby, and I kept her. She had worked in San Antonio, and when she was ready to go, I helped get her a job in Dallas, in the appellate section in the DA's office. I think she would have gotten it anyway because she was just that bright. But she was awesome. And I think she graduated from SMU, I think. But I want to ask Justice Spurlock I think she was his briefing attorney, or maybe Justice Larry Myers. I don't remember, but I kept her.
What was her name? Do you remember?
I can't even remember her last name. Libby.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And how many clerks did one justice have?
One. You had a briefing attorney, and then you had several people that were staff attorneys.
How did you go about selecting?
We visited law schools, and I did Houston. Some of them didn't want to go to Houston, but I did. So I visited the 3 law schools there. Of course, Texas A&M, Texas Wesleyan didn't exist then. Some people went to Dallas. We divided it up. And then we brought back resumes and recommendations to the body of people that you may want to interview, okay? And then we brought them in a group and we interviewed them. And folks decided who they wanted. You chose your own briefing attorney.
Okay, and then what was the most challenging aspect as an appellate judge? Would you say challenging?
The most challenging, even though you didn't think the law was right, write the opinion based on
stare decisis.
Exactly. Sometimes like, this is not right, but so what? This is our law, and you promise to uphold the Constitution and the laws of Texas, and you must do that. Forget your personal opinion as to what's right and wrong.
Well, did you ever run across the what they call the balkanization of Texas, where you might have a court of appeals rule one way and in one district, and another one rule another way?
Yeah.
And what did you do in cases?
Well, in cases like that, I would decide which is the smartest court of appeals. I'm serious. I mean, a lot of times there were the conflicts like that. But I would read their opinion anyway. You know, I would read it. And sometimes you'd have 3 opinions from 3 different courts of appeals, but you still respected them. And a lot of times you agreed with one or the other. That's an interesting phenomena to me. It makes me wonder, do we need all these courts of appeals? And I think we do, as big as our state is. I remember, well, I don't remember, and I know you're too young, but I think the Court of Appeals used to just have 3 members, and it's grown. Yeah, I think that's right. The Second Court of Appeals only had 3 members.
Well, and it took in criminal jurisdiction, and so that.
Yeah, and a lot of the cases were criminal cases. Not only from Tarrant, we had a lot from Parker, we had a lot from Wichita Falls, we had a lot from Denton. One of the saddest cases I remember, again involving children, it was a criminal case where this family of miscreants had sexually and physically abused all these children, siblings and nieces and their biological children and everything else. And they wrote everybody, including the President of the United States, Oprah Winfrey, and everybody else complaining about us. And affirmed. Affirmed. Bye-bye.
This is a little bit off, but I think I want to ask you, does Texas need a court of criminal appeals?
No. We need one court.
Suggest?
I think we need one court, a Supreme Court, to handle criminal, civil, and family.
And what would you do? Would you stay with one? Would you just eliminate 9 judges, or could they do the job? The Texas Supreme Court.
I think the Texas Supreme Court, if it were more diverse. For me, the worst thing about Texas now is the lack of diversity. I think many of the problems we see in society, most judges are going to rule the right way. I don't care what color they are. I really believe that. But I think diversity, by attrition, I would say if a judge reaches retirement, bye-bye. If a judge decides not to run again, bye-bye. But I think those courts ought to be combined. I think we need one Supreme Court.
Of 9 justices?
Exactly. Or 9 or 13, 11.
11. Okay. Do you think there should be an age limit on the Court of Appeal?
Yes, I really do.
Judge?
Yeah. I personally, I think you should not serve. I told you this maybe one time we were talking. I was a plaintiff in the lawsuit to change the way judges are elected in Texas. I really think the Missouri plan or something like that would work better. You don't even know the judges. You're a Democrat, you pull the lever. You're a Libertarian, you pull the lever. You're a Republican. We lawyers, we know the judges for the most part, so we vote on who we think's the best. The average citizen doesn't know. So I would like a different way of electing judges. I think 8 years on a family bench is enough. I really do. I think 12 is too many. I was at 10. That was 2 years too many, in my opinion. In my opinion, and I know people will disagree with me.
What about limits on Court of Appeal?
I think Court of Appeals may be the same.
Do you think Court of Appeals appellate judges need to have been trial judges?
No, no. One of the smartest men I ever met in my life was David Ferris, and he had not been a judge. Had Sam Day been a judge? I don't think so. They were brilliant. They are brilliant. So no, I do not. I don't think you ought to have to be a trial judge to be on the appellate court. It helps you understand better, perhaps, and maybe not. It depends on the individual. So absolutely not. If you got the 10 years experience or whatever, the Constitution says, I think you ought to be eligible for a Court of Appeals.
Okay. Were there any type of cases on the Court of Appeals that you enjoyed or you found particularly challenging?
That trespassed the trial title. This case had been Judge Albert White's court, somebody else's court. Then there was a sheriff's cell. It was so much stuff going on. To this day, I have no idea, and I'll be honest, what the heck they were talking about. I think this case had been in litigation maybe 9 or 10 years. There'd been a sheriff's sale. There'd been, just you name it, and this case had it. And it was finally resolved. Libby did a great job. There's one case I definitely passed on. But to me, that didn't interest me as much as some of the others did. We had medical mal cases. We had, you name it. It came up there. The only thing the Court of Appeals could not hear, of course, are the capital murder cases that led to the death penalty. We could hear the murder cases, okay? We could hear the criminal cases, but no death penalty cases. That's the only thing that we could not hear.
Now, are there any best practices that you could suggest to the courts or attorneys? Or anything that would help them, or things that could help the court, things that can help the attorneys in their practice? That could be helpful.
For me, it's being honest. I think of lawyers, even if you have made a mistake, I say be honest. Approach the judge with the other side, perhaps, and just lay it all out there. You can be strident, but not arrogant. You can be forceful without being disrespectful. Mm-hmm. You don't know how many times, how judges talk just like any other people do. And I bet the most difficult lawyers are on everybody's list. The lawyers that we feel are dishonest. And the same thing for judges. Work hard. Do your job. One of the things Judge Charlie Murray told me, rule, Mary Ellen. That's what you're here. Don't hold cases. The worst thing in the world, I think, is for judges to not take the work seriously. It is an honorable profession, and we owe it to the people to get our work done. That's the worst thing in the world to me. People expect, whether they like it or not, whether we're right or wrong. That's what the appellate court are for. But I think the worst thing in the world, I will never forget, I had a case in Houston when I first started working there. And let me add, after I lost the Court of Appeals, I went to Houston to work as a visiting judge and mediator and arbitrator. But one of the first cases I had was a lawyer on an adoption, had all the paperwork done, but he hadn't done the social study, which is required. And he came to me, hat in hand. He didn't even know me, of course. I just started working there. And what we did was bring his clients into the judge's chambers, they needed passports because they were taking these kids, to Europe or somewhere. And I explained to them we had to have the social study. There was a social worker that could do it pretty quickly, but I could do a name change. I could do a name change immediately, okay? And they were happy with that. We got the social study done, but the lawyer was honest. He said, I don't know how I did this, okay? And this is one of the great lawyers in Houston, but he didn't try. The fingerprint card was there, the criminal hit, everything, but the social study. And we got the biological father there. He'd already signed away his rights. His rights were terminated. But I wanted to put him on notice we were changing the name. He was like, fine. Okay? So I think if you're honest, we've all made mistakes. We've all done things we shouldn't have done or whatever. But let us know and we can help you as best we can. Sometimes we can't. Like Discovery. I mean, you can't file your Discovery Monday morning and trial is at 1:30 Monday afternoon. That quite won't work, okay? But just be honest, be upfront. And again, if you don't respect the person, respect the position. Respect the position, okay? Because one day you may be on that side. And it is a difficult job. It's a difficult job if you like people. If you want to make the world better. I know that sounds simplistic, but why did we get in our profession if we didn't want to make things better for people?
Now, after you left the Court of Appeals, what did you do?
I went to Houston originally. I was going to work until my retirement vested, and it vested, and I've been there 20 years.
What are you doing in Houston?
At first, Judge Shauna Riley and I were visiting judges for the family and juvenile courts. I love juvenile as well. So we were visiting judges. And then judges asked us, would we be interested in mediations? In Houston, in family law, everything has to go to mediation. So I have a private practice doing arbitrations and mediations. The rent-a-judge business is quite active in Harris County. Fourth largest city in the United States. So many filings, so many cases. So they have to do something. So that's what I do, and I cannot believe it. This March will be 20 years.
20 practicing, and you're in the family courts?
Family courts and juvenile.
And you're serving as a district judge?
Yes, when I have worked.
Visiting district judge?
Now the rules won't allow me to sit in Houston. I can only sit in my district, which is the 8th Administrative District of Tarrant County. Not just Tarrant County, but the 11 other counties. But in Houston, mediations and arbitrations is what I do.
How often did you go to Houston?
Quite a lot at first. I spent like 1 year in one court. The judge had some problems and I worked for him for a year. Another judge was very ill and I worked for him 6 or 7 months. Judge O'Reilly and I were very, very grateful to those judges. They used us. We worked hard. They used to call us the 9th and 10th or the 10th and 11th family judges of Harris County because we were there so much. But I'll always be grateful to Harris County. Our judges here, there weren't as many courts, there were not as many opportunities for visiting judge work there were in Houston. And a lot of people didn't want to work in Houston. It's huge, the traffic is, its own worst enemy. And so people just didn't want to work there. But I love Houston. Of course, after 20 years, I would. Yeah. So when I really think about it, half my legal career has been in Houston. I didn't plan that. I was going to have my retirement vest, and I was out of there. And then I started getting to work.
How does that work, retirement vest?
I think it's 12 years, I think. When I went down there, I had like 11 years, maybe 7 or 8 months. So I only needed a couple of months. And I was going to do something. I didn't know what. Teach, join a circus. I don't know what I was going to do. But then it was, people kept asking me to work for them. And so it kind of snowballed. And so after 20 years, I got a full retirement. And you, as a visiting judge, this is interesting. You only have to work 1 day a month as a visiting judge. So I always had a day a month somewhere. Okay. So again, I don't know. And I still do some visiting judge work here in Tarrant County, but not as much as I used to. But in Houston, because, this is no exaggeration. Some Monday morning, there would be 25 visiting judges there from all over the state. Because the overload, the dockets are so massive and everything else. So they have to use mediations and arbitrations. They have to use plea bargaining. I mean, they have to do whatever they can to move those dockets. And those judges work. It's not that they weren't working. They were working, but people kept filing and filing and filing. I mean, so again, I'll always be grateful to Harris County.
Mm-hmm.
I call it my second home, Houston.
Well, are you going to continue to serve?
Yes,
longer?
yes. I love reading murder mysteries and shopping for. My daughter calls them junkies. I call them antiques. but I love to travel and all that. But I can do that and still work. And I still think I'm not that old that I can't work. So.
Now, and this will be the final question. Tell me what other advice you'd like to give new attorneys and practicing attorneys.
I think get involved. I think we as lawyers have a responsibility for community service, for bar leadership. I will never forget the first two people that asked me to join a committee here were Justice Ann Gardner and her husband Terry Gardner. And it was the junior bar, whatever we called it then. I will never forget those two for that. I'd say get involved in bar activities. It's fun. I mean, it's hard work like what you're doing. It's hard, it's interesting, and also give back to community. We still have so many problems where we lawyers, not just giving free legal advice, but mentors, like big brothers, big sisters. There's such a great need for a lot of programs like that. Go clean your shelf off and take food to the Tarrant County Food Bank or the Community Food Bank. We lawyers, to me, have an added responsibility to be the best stewards of our lives and our government than any other profession to me.